Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about The Cursed Six, Book 1, Virgil, by Miguel Torres Jr. This book is by somebody who is in the audience and contacted me after he finished it and asked me to read the book. I had agreed to read the book, and so here we are today. You're free to say who you are yourself if you would like to, but I don't want to out you. This author also, over a period of months, said, "This author is free to out themselves, but I am not going to." The author also said that they wanted feedback very badly from me, so here we are. Please don't hate what is about to happen. That is like your only warning because before we get started, though, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lamoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video, we bask in your creative genius. This month, we are doing the cringe stream all the way at the end of the month, where there is no prompt except cringe. Interpret the idea of cringe and write the cringiest cringe fiction that you can think of to write. There will be no names attached to the readings, though I will need a name attached on the back end. So when the award ceremony comes through, we can vote for the cringiest and I will know who to contact. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. It's worked on me a couple of times. I hope that it's worked on other people. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. With that said, let's get into the story. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to try to start from, here on out, doing a quick summary of the idea of like a pitch of what the story is, and then we'll get into the larger summary and discussion. But before that, even, I'm also going to start off by saying at the very first page, this labels itself as a modern day Greek tragedy, which, if you know me from around this channel, I don't like tragedies for tragedy's sake. I'm not really a fan of nihilism either. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have value to a lot of people. I know a lot of people get catharsis out of tragedy. Obviously, another book review more recently was also a tragedy, but it's not what I particularly enjoy. The book is also filled with illustrations at the top of each chapter, as the author has included an artist that they love in the creation of this work. I would also say that this work falls into the category of middle grade because it reads very young. The main character is a sophomore-ish, and there are a variety of characters that come in of different ages throughout, but I would say that this reads very young, probably middle grade. I don't know if that was the author's intent, but there are some things, especially in here, that make it read very young. One of them is going to be the censoring of swearing, where it actually has asterisks in the middle of many swear words throughout the book. So a quick pitch of what this book is. The Cursed Six is a book about a kid named Virgil who discovers that he is one of six cursed children that are all part of this guy's revenge scheme to get back at humanity after people broke into his house and murdered his wife and child. And so then he summoned a demon, and the demon used this guy to curse children that would then help him come back from hell and take over the world. And so Virgil is one of those six kids. Now, having said that, let's get into the story. Something else that you should know about the structure of this story is it kind of breaks into multiple parts. And so each part starts with a prologue. I go through calling it a prologue because it opens the book with this prologue that is Jean Eli, this man from Haiti who has magical ability, well, who is from a family where his mother and his sister were witches of sorts. There's a specific word in here, but I'm going to simplify language. So they were witches of sorts, and this is sometime in the past, and this is in 1982. And then the main story that deals with Virgil is in 1999. And so then at the start of every basically act, it comes back to some part in 1982, following either Jean Eli or his sister, because eventually it switches over to paying attention to his sister, and then it switches back to Jean Eli. So just know that each section starts out with Jean Eli, otherwise we'll be following Virgil, and I'll let you know every time we switch back to Jean Eli's area. opening with the first page just to get the tone. Quote, "It was eerily dark that late summer night. The lush tropical landscapes of eastern Haiti, a relatively small country on the western half of an oddly shaped island named Hispaniola, was currently dealing with a muggy, sweltering heat wave. It was there, right on that deceptively beautiful Caribbean island, where something extraordinarily evil began to sow the seeds of a truly vile and profoundly wicked scheme. A scheme that bore fruit through the agony of a broken man. The small, humble, semi-dilapidated home of one Monsieur Jean Eli emanated an aura of grim black magic energy. On that night, Monsieur Eli was dead set on implementing what was supposed to be his final act, his ultimate solution, bringing an end to the wretched world that had all but destroyed him. To start out, I do have to say that I'm not a big fan of hitting it home with how much the story is going to suck using adjectives in the beginning. And by suck, I mean how terrible things are going to be. The book broadcasts that it's a Greek tragedy on the first page, so then adding deceptively beautiful, extraordinarily evil, truly vile, profoundly wicked, and bore fruit through agony, just beat you over the head with this in the same paragraph. And it can be used for like a fairy tale type of vibe, but that sort of thing never really gives up. And it ends up feeling like the story is just telling you things, telling you how to feel, because the entire story almost is written as a summary instead of like building you into the scene. You could have made this place sound beautiful and built the suspense by not specifically saying this evil thing was going to come. Especially because we're going to be revisiting this exact thing, and it's going to be like, oh, and he summoned a demon, and this demon is doing this thing. But since it's already told you it's all evil, there's like no suspense, there's no surprise, because you already know from the very first paragraph. And this would also have been fine if this was just like the intro. So it is hitting it like it is that fairy tale, like you are listening to an overview in a movie. But then it never comes back because it's already done all of the intro very, very quickly like it needed to do. But it continually does it in the future where it's not necessary. So instead, it ends up feeling like summary writing instead of writing the story. Moving on. Jean Eli's mother and sister used to be witch doctors, and so he studied their old books for something helpful. It says that he attempted to use his magic to summon something helpful, but got something worse and not what he had hoped for. Considering he wanted to end humanity, I'm not entirely sure what he was hoping for that would be bad, but like not that bad. The word here, the word not what he'd hoped for was used specifically, again, hitting on with a negative all in a very small span of time. This is also just telling language. When I started reading this, I went in with the feeling that it was going to be written like a fable or a fairy tale, which may have been more telling language than an active story, but that is not the case. And it also has more to do, it feels like it is closer to actually a play than it is a book. But even if it was written as a fable or a fairy tale, I would have pulled back on some of the adjectives for how hard it is beating the reader over. And again, with the level and the amount of like beating over the head, it's one of those things that also makes it feel younger, because picture books and middle grade books may have more of this telling language because you're leaving less to be inferred by the reader because the readers are young and may not be able to interpret as much text. So that's something to think about when you're using a lot of adjectives. At this point that it switches from the current of him summoning something, that it goes back in time to exposition dump his life on us, his previous life, where it's explaining that he lives in a poor city. His mother mysteriously died when he was 11, and he lived there under a cruel and a vicious regime, of course, and telling you again that it's going to end terribly. And I'm telling you, the story informing you that everything is terrible never really seems to end. Quote, Jean had witnessed throughout his childhood just how awful the world can truly be to its homeless population, with the influx of indifferent tourists and opportunistic monsters equally ravaging the streets of his homeland, forcing him at a young age to harden his fragile heart, coercing him to become more spiteful, angry, and bitter. So again, it's just telling, and it could actually make you feel for Jean Eli if it showed him living his life and you saw him getting bitter. But again, if this is going to be a fairy tale, then you can skip all of that because you're just setting up what will be a main antagonist, or not an antagonist, but something that is going to affect the main protagonist later. But that's not what this is doing. And then we speed run into all of his relationships. Quote, "This is how life was for young Monsieur Eli and his kin. Nothing else mattered to Jean until one fateful day, the day that he fell in love. Her name was Bella Martin, and their love blossomed rapidly. They immediately married and soon after created a son whom they had named Fezzi Eli. Together, they found a way to make do with the few material possessions that they had, worked hard for every penny that they had earned, and eventually saved up enough money to buy a tiny, humble home to call their very own." As you can see, it also continuously shifts between Monsieur Eli, Jean Eli, and Jean, which in previous videos, if you've seen them, I also complain about. That is, you need to generally be fairly consistent within the story of what you're calling people, and the only real difference of that is context. So a character might have one name that is what they go by generally, but then in dialogue, people can address somebody differently. Or if it's in first person, then you're going to have the narrator be constant with that name. So if you look at like Bodymore, Joey goes by Joey. Her father calls her Josephine. Jag calls her Joey. Wayland calls her Joey. And you'll notice that Joey calls Jag Jay, Jag, and Jagger. And it depends on the context. She'll call him Jay because of the text messages. So sometimes when she's being short or trying to be quick, she'll say Jay in person. She'll call him Jag generally because that's what he goes by. And then she'll call him Jagger when he's either in trouble or she's trying to get his attention, or she's trying to be more serious. So like you can switch the name around, but changing it in the narrative and changing it without context makes it doesn't really make sense. So you should have a reason behind the name changes. And not just in the same, it makes me think of Chuck Tingles that was changing between dad and then dad's proper name in the same paragraph and then made it seem like it was a different person. And in this, it's doing the same thing where it's Eli and Jean. I also felt like I needed to, this is getting actually back to the story, but I felt like I needed to put that in there so that you could see that this whole thing is really just summary. His sister moved into his house with him and helped him make some money. Then they became very respected in the community. I'm not really sure how they became respected in the community because it didn't really say how they gained respect in the community, and then they lived there for 13 years. None of it is explained how or why. Then suddenly rumors spread that they had a bunch of treasure in their house. Again, how? Why? How did they attain this stuff? Did people give it to them? Is it because of the respect that the sister got because she was a witch and so people donated stuff to, like, how and why were they targeted with these rumors? How did people think that they had this stuff? They lived in a little humble house. So like, how did they move up in society? It's just it doesn't really matter because this is all just set up so that Jean Eli's wife and child can be murdered while the house is being robbed and make him want vengeance against all of existence as he goes crazy with grief. And confusingly, it then said that his sister was the one who summoned the power, and it was using a book of summoning demons that her brother didn't know that she had. And quote, "It granted them both an opportunity to take part in a very wicked plan." We get it. It's evil. And I think it hit way too hard. Like, there's no reason to keep bashing the reader over the head with this because we already know that it's evil. From the very beginning of this, it keeps going evil. And something bad happened. And on this beautiful island, evil was afoot. It just keeps doing that. It could have been suspenseful if it wasn't already telegraphed. I also wanted to mention that when I was reading this, I actually had earlier in the day been looking at an old reading list that I made and removed some books from that list that I didn't want to read anymore. I had to look up a couple of them because they'd been added so long ago that I couldn't remember what they were and I needed to verify them. And one of those books was called The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Thomas Ligotti. And there was a review that actually made me think of the starting of this book, possibly a mindset behind part of this book, but I'm not going to put that on the author, but it gave me the vibes from this review of someone else's book. Quote, "Due to all this, he determines that having children is fundamentally not evil, because good and evil are just delusions placed on an uncaring universe by a humanity who is unable to survive without imbuing worthless things with unnecessary meaning, but perhaps it could be phrased as being fundamentally malignantly useless. Ligotti makes the point that very few of us would be willing to be born in the past because the conditions there, but none of us take the viewpoint of the future and spare our children from being born now rather than, say, in 100 years when suffering might be less. Since all people will suffer and die, creating a new human life is dooming them to suffering and death, which is hardly the compassionate act that raising a child is usually considered to be. It might even be thought of as incredibly selfish, creating a new life just because of one's own desires when that child will inevitably suffer and die." And that is what this book also is, because it is cursing 6 children well before they are even there. Like, one of them is cursing a 10-year-old who will eventually give birth when she is older. 2 of them are pregnant women, and I can't remember what the others are, but this is cursing children and basically saying children are a curse in a way. Anyway, I will link the Conspiracy Against the Human Race down below, along with the Cursed Six, if you were interested in checking out either books. But the prologue of this book made me think of that, probably because of the theme on the value of life, or lack thereof, that might be in this book based on how that opening went. It was just a vibe, though. However, now we are going to finish with the prologue, finish with Jean Eli for now, and skip to and go and into chapter 1. We now skip forward 17 years to 1999, a different character entirely. It's an awkward teenage boy walking down the street in Pennsylvania. His name is Virgil. He's walking alone, and while looking at a billboard for his family's grocery store, he is described as, quote, this caramel-skinned, corn shirt-wearing Hispanic boy donning a fuzzy black skull cap that barely hid his nappy, dark brown, puffy hair, smirked and chuckled a bit as he remembered how his dad had proudly announced his recent ad plan to the family. The family, of course, being him and his mother. His mother was disappointed by dad spending all of their advertising money on this one billboard. We have a situation here where the book is trying so hard to give you all of the information at once as quickly as possible, even when it's not necessary, randomly adding in the mother's name, Susan, in the middle of the paragraph so that you know her name when it's not necessary information at this point. They actually could have given you the same information in a more natural way by actually showing the parents arguing with one another and dad being like, but Susan, don't worry about it. I've got it all handled and I got the best billboard in town. And so then you have dad calling mom by Susan. Now, as Virgil is standing there, he gets picked on by a couple of mean boys walking by, and after having enough, quote, before Virgil was able to stop himself, he brazenly shouted out to them a verbal flurry of angry slurs and venomous F-bombs. In an instant, Virgil realized the grave mistake that he had just made and immediately dashed toward the opposite direction. The other kids catch up with him, beat him up, and abandon him. Virgil continues his way to school. It finishes by telling us that he is an outcast of his school as he approaches. Again, most of this is setting up everything with telling language. Also, there is a lot of anger in the narration. A summary of how Virgil became friends with Nicky, Bob, and Lamar, who are the 3 people who just beat him up. They became friends by playing video games and watching television together after school and on weekends. They were the tightest of bros until freshman year of high school, when suddenly everyone but Virgil became popular somehow. It seems like this was in part because Virgil was going to work for his family's business when the others were going to parties. They had different tastes in music, and Virgil always turned down hanging out with his friends when they invited him to a party. So the weekends kind of just stopped happening together. Further during the day, Further on, he talks about a day when they were playing kickball and he slipped and caused his team to lose. Someone called him an ass face, and everyone else got obsessed with calling him ass face. One of his friends thought that it was the most funniest thing in the world and just started calling him ass face all the time. Then he talks about how his ex-friend Nicky started calling him Virgil the Virgin because Virgil happened to dance with this girl that Nicky actually liked at a house party. I don't know how that translates into Virgil the Virgin. Maybe he was trying to scare the chick away from Virgil because by saying that Virgil was a virgin, but I don't really know how that translates into that insult. So what happened was Sierra Mendez, this really, really hot girl with a bunch of curves and a lot of money and a family where she throws secret parties when the family is out of the town, invited Nick, Rob, and Lamar to a party. And to this house party, they also decided that for once they would invite Virgil again, even though he always turns down. And for once, Virgil actually accepted. Now, something to know about Sierra, it's not going to come in at any point other than to be contradictory in some cases, but Sierra's family is devoutly religious, and instead of taking her on religious retreats when they leave town, they just trust her to leave, and they never find out that she is throwing parties when they're out of town. And she is throwing parties to deliberately undermine them. It says that they do it as a punishment because they think that neglect will make her start behaving But honestly, I think they just gave up on her at some point. Now, going back to what happened with Nikki at Sierra's party, she was just dancing throughout the night. So then Nikki comes over and asks her if she will dance with him. And she says that she is tired. She's going to take a break, try and ask again later. So Nikki is a little bit butthurt because he was turned down to dance. Well, meanwhile, Sierra is going into the kitchen to take a quick break, to get a drink. And that is where Virgil is actually hiding out because he is not really being a part of the party. Sierra sees Virgil over there. She is dumbstruck by how cool he seems, being over there, being all mysterious, that she runs into the refrigerator and he's like, "Whoa, are you okay?" And she's like, "Bro, the drinks are just like getting to me, man." But then she thinks he's so cool that she asks him to dance and he agrees to dance. I would assume that our guy here would know that his friend Nikki had a crush on Sierra, so he probably should have said no. But he said yes, and they go and dance, and then Nikki got mad. And that's why Nikki started calling him Virgil the Virgin, because he got to dance with the girl that Nikki wanted to dance with. Despite all of this, and the first chapter being where he got beat up by his ex-friends and he walked into school alone, he still tries to sit down with them at the school, but he's already being called ass face. So did the ass face incident happen in middle school? This was a part where I was confused. There are parts where the timeline just jumps all around in chapter to chapter and paragraph to paragraph. So I thought, I don't know where the befriending Sierra comes in to the time zone. I mean, this must be recent, right? And then if he became friends with her at the party, then this wouldn't be a surprise. You would think that Nikki would want to become friends with Virgil so that Virgil could wingman for him to freaking Sierra, but that's not what happens. Sierra invites him over to come and sit with her, and before he can get there, Nikki runs over and whispers something in Sierra's ear, which turns into her asking him if he told his friends that they had sex at the party. So then I guess that we are also still back in time, following the night of the party, but not the party. There was no follow-up to this, by the way. It just has her say, "Did you tell your friends this?" And then it ends the scene. She doesn't throw water at him, nothing. Instead, we get an abrupt cut, and now everyone is avoiding him at school. So I guess that just happened. There is this weird ordering of things in here that goes, like I said, goes back and forth. And then we skip to summer where he is hanging out with himself. And now he returns to the current timeline, the current year, where he is walking into the school alone with no friends. The ordering and the description of the timeline are confusing and read unrevised to me. They read like they came out of the author, and then the author never really went back to reorder them once the author had ideas of where they wanted to take it. Now in his theater class, he gets paired up with Syria, and this girl named Olivia, or Liv. Nothing from previously with the party, with him telling his friends that he had sex with her. Like, none of their background comes into this. None of their relationships that were previously mentioned come into this. And instead, they just bond over acting and the mutual interests like music, become friendly, and quote, "The rest of the school day passed right on by, ceaselessly towards positivism as love and karma had intended." It kind of makes me think of the stories that are meant to be like painful, where they're like, if you think of Out of Darkness, where Out of Darkness was like, and they had this great Christmas and they exchanged gifts to one another and they all sat under the tree and it was wonderful. And then the next time they're going to get slapped down in the next couple of chapters. So Virgil goes home, has dinner, dances with his mother a little, and then he goes to bed and dreams of Olivia, the girl that he met at school earlier. He thinks that she is very cute and they love the same music. Musical taste is seemingly very important in this story. It's brought up more than a couple of times. Outside of his room, Virgil sees a troublemaker named Marcus. This guy is in a gang, and he's been hanging outside of his dad's store for so long now that there's a rumor going about that Marcus is being allowed to sell drugs after hours outside of his dad's store. Virgil gets so angry that he points at Marcus and says a word that psychically bends his legs backwards. This freaks Virgil out and he lays back down, panicking, while Marcus lays on the ground outside in agony. And he just doesn't know what to do with himself. Somebody else will help him. Don't worry about this. Going into the second prologue, we're back in 1982, and Jean-Eli is in Haiti. He's standing in his room with this demon offering to help him enact his revenge and eradicate the human race. You should be saying enslave the human race, because that seemed more the demon's idea. Jean-Eli's sister comes in and tells him who the demon is, and somehow the woman who was a witch, who was the one who knew about the demon summoning book, didn't realize that demons don't play fair. Of all of the people that you would think understand how demons work, it's somebody with a demonology book who manages demon magic. I don't know how you overlook something like that. But anyway, now the family is cursed. You would think that the first thing when it comes to, well, we don't really use the demon summoning book because demons usually curse the family. You know, they're not like they want better life for you. They're like, I want better life for me at the expense of everybody else, and I will lie to get it. So she is now bound to this demon and this house in a way, and Jean-Eli is threatened to do as the demon says, or his sister will be in agony forever. Now we return to 1999 to the perspective of Liv's diary, and we're going to have a couple different sections in this book that are from a diary perspective, and what it does is it just monologues at you, telling you things that have happened off screen, and also telling you feelings. So it is these chapters that are specifically the journal entries, and one of them is Liv, another one is going to be Sierra's perspective, and I feel like there are a couple of others. We'll get there. But it feels like this is very inspired by Greek tragedy plays, because back, if you look at the original Greek tragedy plays, many of them mostly consist of monologuing, because things would happen off stage and then somebody would come on and tell you what happened between scenes. The entire chapter is just Liv telling you that she is an introvert, that she doesn't know why she's in theater, but it's working out. Her new friends think that she's good at ukulele and she should start a club. She has a crush on Virgil and doesn't think that he is creepy like everyone says, and her dad abandoned her in the family because she wasn't easy. Then there is this bizarre description of Syria, Liv, and Virgil all going out to eat for lunch when Nick comes over to insult Virgil as if that'll win him Sierra's attention, because yeah, he's still trying to get Sierra's attention. I don't really see where he thinks that he's going to get anything by literally making her change her plans or insulting those that she chooses to share her space with. I get it if you want to be an alpha male idiot to push your ex-friend out of the way because you're mad, but this makes no sense. When you're frustrating the popular girl that you have a crush on, you're just going to not be invited to any of her parties ever again. And that's when it comes to the idea of think about what your character is doing to get to their future goal, as opposed to just like trying to victimize your main character to make them look more sad, more dejected. At some point when a main character is hated by everybody, I just start to think maybe they deserve it. That's just me, because, I'm like that. Nick snaps at them to go away and leave Sierra alone. Virgil growls with a sexy ferocity, defending their right to be there, I guess. Nick pushes it with Virgil, and then somehow something weird happens with Nick, and his arm goes to liquid. After everyone runs out of the lunchroom, panicked, Liv asked Virgil if he was the one that did that. Virgil says that he has powers, and Liv is like hyper turned on by this and kisses him when she says that she doesn't know why she just kissed him then, but like right then and there, she was definitely sure that she had fallen for him. Like she wants that power. I was expecting Liv to be like demon adjacent because of that. It actually doesn't come up ever again, other than that she just thinks he's super cool because he's got powers. He then walks her home. Now we're at this weird point in time where he's explaining to Liv and Sierra what his powers mean and what happened with Marcus, and that was in the past in a previous chapter. I think whatever happened with Liv should have been seen from Virgil's perspective to streamline the story, because it really feels like it was written in a way as it came to the author but was never cleaned up, and this is another spot where it specifically feels like that. Sierra thinks that Virgil is lying, says that he needs to get his ego checked in and stop lying. She thought that he was better than the other boys in school, but evidently he is not, so she walks off. After school, Liv and Virgil are talking to one another, and she tells him that he should probably keep his powers on the down low because everyone is always talking about him anyway, and the gossip makes her angry. She says that he is really cute, so he asks if she wants to hang outside of school sometime, and then asks if he can kiss her. She panics and says that things are moving too fast. However, she does kiss him on the cheek as a promise to him that he'll always matter to her. It just happens so fast. Virgil goes home and his dad is listening to some sad music. Quote, "That depressing music is the music of love and heartbreak, mijo," his father responded. "It's how we remember to appreciate what we have while having it. Nothing stays in this world. Not you, not me, not even love. These songs are our reminder of that. Dominican blues, songs of love and loss, and our reminder to appreciate everything that we've got, Virgilio." He goes into his room where he thinks about the kiss that he had and how exciting it was. Then a rock comes through the window with a note saying that people know who he is and they're going to come for him. I don't really think that picking on a guy with powers with threats is the greatest idea, but we never said anybody in here is a genius. Now into a different perspective with Marcus and this random gang. Marcus is complaining about how he knows that Virgil is the one who broke his legs somehow, though he doesn't really have an explanation. The group decides that if Virgil really does have powers, then they're going to try and recruit him to the gang and use him for gang activities. Marcus is pissed since that mofo broke his legs, but has to submit because otherwise he's going to get his head cracked in for defiance. Return to Virgil's point of view, and his mom is freaking out about the broken window. He lies about it and says that he accidentally smacked it while he was sleeping, and she's like, "Oh my gosh. We can't fix all these windows, so you just get to be cold." Virgil eventually leaves the house and runs into his old friend Lamar, who is asking him to talk. Switch over to Sierra's journal perspective now, and she talks about being sent to the Dominican Republic by her parents to get her out of the house when they went to church things. So if she's just going to be sent away to these things because they're not taking her to church events, then why does she get left behind constantly to throw parties? And how is nobody gossiping about how this perfectly religious, devout, whatever family's daughter is running amok when they are out of town? While she was in the Dominican Republic with her cousin, she talked to an old Haitian lady who was into magic. This is going to be Jean-Eli's sister, we will find out. When she was 12, shortly before she was sent back home, Gustav, this creepy guy who hit on little girls, came running out of a room in a house on fire and then turned to ash. Her cousin was in the bedroom that Gustavo had come out of and had clearly been sexually assaulted by this man, or the man attempted to sexually assault her. No one knew what happened with that guy. There was no evidence that Gustavo had even been dead because his ash had blown away and there was just no evidence of him as a person being there. So it was just declared that he was missing. Everyone in this girl's family then started avoiding the magical girl except for Sierra. Later, the cousin ran off with a Haitian woman who turned out to be Jean-Eli's sister, and then she leaves a note for Sierra saying that the woman will help her control her curse. This thing is telling us that the two were close, but we were never seeing it. She explains how at the party, Gustavo tried to assault her and then she yelled, "Burn." So the girl explains how at this party that Gustavo had tried to assault her, and then this girl just pointed at him and yelled "burn," and he burned up. Then her parents avoided her, afraid of her, and that's why she eventually left, and explains that Fabi told her, quote, "She explained that there was going to be more children like her appearing soon, children with dark, fucked up powers like hers. Children that were brought here for one reason, to bring about some kind of apocalypse, end of the world types kind of stuff. End of the world kind of stuff. End of the world type stuff." I am so confused. I'm thinking of like what we're going to get later, where you have Fabi's niece. No, Fabi's daughter wants to kill all the children because it was her father's mission, Fabi's husband, to stop the end of the world. So you would think that Fabi would also be on that, but you would think that there would be some sort of like teamwork in a way, or at least uniting something, but it doesn't explain what any of these people are doing or why they are doing what they are doing, or if she knows obviously where magic cursed kid number 1 is, what she's doing with that kid. That kid could be used to go and help find other kids so that they don't become evil. I don't know. For me, it also didn't make a lot of sense to introduce these powers as being evil when also using them to fend off a pedophile rape attempt. It's not the end of the world kind of stuff to shoot flames out of your hands either, let alone it being a 12-year-old girl stopping a would-be rapist from raping her. Like, that doesn't speak evil powers to me. Maybe accidentally burning down the house would have been better. Anyway, she's pretty sure that Virgil is the same thing as her cousin somehow. I guess there's only one type of curse in the world. Now in class, Liv is staring at Syria. Now in class, Liv is staring at Syria. Saria thinks about telling Liv about her cousin and then is like, it's been a few years. Maybe I should try and find where she is. I wonder if mom knows where she is. She ran away from home with some random woman. Why would anybody know where she is? And that was like, what, how many years ago? At least she was 12. So like 4 years ago, she ran away from home, no contact with anybody. And now how are you going to find her? Don't worry, it's not going to be a problem. She just finds her like that. Anyway, returning to Jean-Eli, 1982, Sister is tied to a bed, and he tells her what the demon's plans are. Quote, we have to put ourselves in a hopeless situation, Fabi. The demon, Malfurnus, told me the plan. That so-called many-colored demon wants its powers divided upon 6 children hosts who will be born with the mark that I will place onto their mothers' bodies. The children are to remain dormant until the last child born with the curse reaches the age of 10. The demon will then unite them and become whole once more here on Earth. It had no interest in going through with our stupid little revenge plan. It had no interest in eradicating humanity. It means to enslave us. Malfurnus wants to enslave the entirety of humankind, and I want to end this awful existence for all of us, and it wants nothing more than to prolong our misery for all eternity. My guy, if you eradicated everything and went to hell for it, what do you think would be your prize? Eternal misery. So, like, consider your goal granted. That's where you're at. This also doesn't make any sense, by the way. It says that all of the kids are meant to remain dormant until the last kid reaches the age of 10, but Virgil is getting his powers, and it's 1999, and he's, 15, 16? We have the cousin who got her powers at 12, but the last child will not be born until 2025. So what does it mean by they're going to be dormant? Obviously, it doesn't mean that they're not going to develop their powers, but is it... then it doesn't even work either, because Virgil ends up in this book as we get here. It is still 1999, and he goes, I am going to destroy everybody, and it's not even 2025 when he is like, I am going to create a cult out of people and find my brothers and sisters. So there's not like a demonic possession that is then going to cause them to completely switch their personalities because somebody hit something. Like, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, continuing on, he says that she needs to try and stop the demon. Why? He's protected her as much as he can by being the demon's sacrificial lamb to go and do this. When he is like, look, I wanted to kill all of humanity. I didn't want to suffer eternity. He's not even sorry. He just doesn't want to go to hell. I'm sorry. There's nowhere else for you to go, Jean-Eli. Also, we've seen no reason for this dude to change his opinions to want to stop the demon. Well, I guess, okay, his only reason to stop the demon from this is so he doesn't go to hell. It is what it is. Returning to 1999 between Lamar and Virgil, Lamar apologizes, obviously kind of sucking on his toe a little bit because he's got the powers, and Virgil is not having it. Quote, really? You thought that it was cool, Lamar? Virgil snapped back, angrily interrupting him as he held back tears. Nah, man. Cool for me would have been watching all 3 of y'all having your arms breaking. We were best friends, man. Y'all just threw me away, and I don't even know what the fuck I did. To top it off, we've only been in school for a month, and I've already been harassed and attacked by y'all so often that I even thought about fucking killing myself. Shit. If it wasn't for Saria and Liv, I'd have run away or killed myself after the first day back. So honestly, you can keep your apology, Lamar. Fuck off. Couple of things. This is contradicting for me in the future of this book when our guy Virgil here says that he tried to be a good person, because right now he's like, nah, man, fuck y'all. I want to break all of y'all's legs. Fuck you. I would kill myself. Fuck you. I got powers. Fuck. Virgil, you did not try. Anyway, Lamar yells for Virgil to run, and we switch POV. What you're also going to notice is that these like POV switches, and especially with the prologue, doesn't make any sense. I think the book should have started out setting up everything with Jean Eli and then just like left out everything with the sister that's going to come later and then stuck in the current timeline, because I don't think that it was serviced by switching back and forth. And then where it cut stuff off doesn't make any sense. So then we switch over to a perspective with Liv and Saria at school. Liv asks why Saria has been ignoring her and Virgil since, the arm situation and the cafeteria. That's fair, I would say, to ignore that. The two of them are fighting. Saria drags Liv out of the classroom because she needs to explain what's going on. And this is when she breaks down and mentions the letter that her cousin gave her. And she feels so bad that she is mentally losing it at the moment that Liv is like, look, I will comfort you. I'm going to tell you that I live with mental instability, okay? I am autistic and schizophrenic. Quote, Saria heard all of this and looked up at Liv and thanked her for trusting her enough with all of that personal information. She then smiled quickly before her face turned serious again, wiping the tears from her face, and she decided then and there to talk to Liv about her cousin. We then go to Virgil being kidnapped by Omar and Marcus's gang. Lamar was there also, but for being Lamar was also beat up, but that was for being a snitch because he was a part of this whole scam going on. It's revealed that all of his other friends stopped talking to him since they were all selling drugs and getting involved with gangs, and he was too good for that. They say that if he doesn't do what they say, then they're going to go after his dad's grocery store, and he wouldn't want something bad to happen to that, would he? Acting like it's some kind of secret that his dad owns the grocery store, because they're like, bruh, we know more about you than you think. Bruh, his dad's picture is on the billboard. Everyone knows. It's also got his family name on it. It's like Santos Groceries. He gets injected with some kind of drug and then passes out again. He's found by his mom and taken to the hospital. The doctors ask if he's been doing drugs because he was full of opioids, and the proper authorities have now been informed. Virgil is writing in a journal about how he's been sent to a drug rehab house. So now we switch to Virgil writing in a journal perspective, monologuing about how he was been sent to a drug rehab house with others for a month. The house is supposed to only be for 18 pluses, but they made an exception for him. Why didn't they just send him to a teen rehab house? Why an adult one? When in captivity, he tests his powers and finds out that they're real. Liv comes and visits him a lot and plays music. Saria comes and visits him. Liv is visiting him a lot more, and he gets out early because he's behaving well. He wants to go and be left alone by this gang. People at the school are looking at him all weird when he finally returns. The gang is still stalking and harassing him, though, and threatening him. It makes no sense when he can physically destroy them all without ever having touched them. He's getting angry at the stalking, and considering how much this broadcasts that it's a tragedy, we know that something is going to happen, and we know that he's probably going to get angry enough to destroy something. Sitting in class then with Saria and Lamar, Lamar is asking her to apologize to Virgil for him since she's going to see him again and she's closer with him than he is. For some reason, Saria pretends that Lamar doesn't know who she is when she is literally Miss Popular Party Queen. So this is another thing that should be obvious because it's built into the world that everybody knows she is Miss Popular. So it's information that they should all carry with her. But she's like, oh, you probably don't know who I am. I'm Saria. Saria goes to Liv and Virgil, who are talking about the talent show that's coming up, and then they leave to go home talking about music. The talent show is irrelevant, by the way. They then get confronted by that gang, and Marcus is in a wheelchair, staring furiously like a mofo. And they try to threaten him to get into the gang. That guy is just like, I'm going to take the brake off and I'm going to run you over, okay? I have hooked up this thing with nitro. You do not want to see this wheelchair on nitro, bubba. Virgil fights back by saying break while pointing his finger at the gangsters. You know what that means. Busted. We then switch perspectives again to what is called a transcript of the police interrogation of Marcus. This recaps the kidnapping and the drugging that they did of Virgil, and one of the gang members got his arm amputated, all of his arms amputated from that break that Virgil did. And you also have it recapping the fight scene that just broke out. You know, we could have seen it in the previous chapter, but instead it just broke it off instead of showing it, and then switched to monologuing what it is that he saw. So instead of seeing the dude pull a knife on Liv, while trying to force Virgil into the gang. You get this random kid being like, bro, it happened. And then the detectives are like, quote, "This sounds a little far-fetched, but I like the story so far." Detective 2. "Oh yeah, this is pretty goddamn entertaining if you ask me. Go on, Mr. Combe." He talks about seeing these glowing eyes and then bones snapping. Omar and Virgil are now missing, and the detectives leave to get coffee. That's enough of that interview for now. Then we get another transcript, but it's actually Virgil's mom who says that her home and business have been burned to the ground and her husband is in critical condition. What happened? It's a recap of an attack on the shop. Virgil used his mind to attack the gang members that came. Whatever, it doesn't matter. And the cops go off to get donuts while Virgil's mom is done talking. Now we're at Omar's hiding place, and he's wanting to get away from Virgil. He's like, "I'm gonna skip town. I got these guns. I got all my supplies." But wouldn't you know, Virgil followed him to his secret house. Oh, and by the way, it is not Omar's secret house. It is literally just Omar's house. He literally just went home. Omar is blaming everything that has happened so far on Virgil not joining the gang. You know, he wouldn't be trying to flee town. His gang wouldn't be almost all dead or arrested if not for Virgil just joining the gang. And Virgil is like, "Bro, I didn't even report you for the drugs and the kidnapping, and you couldn't just leave me alone." As they fight, Virgil uses his power to crush Omar's head psychically. Poof. Apparently. and since this is just Omar's house and Omar has been MIA, the cops are now coming to check out his house. I don't know why they wouldn't check it out sooner. This must have happened before like the police interrogations, right? Because the timeline on this is all messed up. But so the cops are coming. Virgil is panicking about having killed Omar right there. And so he flees. Returning to Liv's journal, she's telling us how she was diagnosed at age 12 with schizophrenia and how she was told that she was the youngest person diagnosed with that disorder. She didn't understand what anyone was saying back then, and we get a hard segue into her talking about some boy in middle school that ended up hurting her. She says that he thought that she was weird, too weird to be friends with, and the other kids started calling her Liv the Tard and throwing rocks at her. No one helped her. They were throwing rocks at her feet specifically. Then the girls escalated things and beat her up and shoved her into glass. She says that no one at the school would help her because there was just no physical evidence. But then when things did become physical and she had to go and see the nurse, she lies and nobody still does anything, even though there is now physical evidence. As she gets stressed out, she starts saying no constantly, and it made her dad mad. I think this is supposed to be part of the autism. He smacked her, then she got hurt worse, like having fallen into something, ends up at the hospital, and when her and her mom got back from the hospital, dad was gone, saying that this was just too much for him. We return to the modern day, and Virgil is there. Liv is stitching him up, and this is where we learn that because she got beat up so much in school, the nurse taught her how to stitch herself up, and then so she is now stitching Virgil up, having learned how to do stitches. She calls Sierra for help since Virgil's parents aren't available, and she hopes that she did okay with the stitches. Going back to the prologue, in 1982, enter Gonzalo coming to John Eli's house to help Fabi. The man lets her up, and she tests something out on him. I think it was a control powder that she's going to use against her brother, and then the two of them set off together to stop Jean Eli, or at least to try to find Jean Eli. Returning to 1999, Sierra goes to Liv's house, and Sierra explains her family's dark past, who her cousin was, and gives Liv her cousin's letter. Liv tells Sierra to find her cousin. Sierra asks her mom about her cousin and if she knows where she is, and the mom is like, "Oh yeah, she's just living in the United States. She's living down in Florida." How does she just know this? Mom wasn't even there when Sierra ran away. Did Sierra like contact her at some point, be like, "Hey, can I live with you?" And then she was like, "No." Like, how? So Sierra's parents sent her to the Dominican Republic when she was a kid to give her somewhere to be with family, but apparently the cousin living in Florida makes it a long distance call, and that's just too much trouble. That's literally what her mom says is the reason why they never talk to her cousin in Florida. It's a long distance call and it's too much trouble. After that, Sierra and Liv go up to check on Virgil. Sierra is half flirty and asking if Liv had sex with him because he is half naked. Not, that she was tending to a wound. I don't know why she has to ask it half flirty. At this point, Sierra goes downstairs to call her cousin. Again, weird timing because we already went through this. While she is downstairs, Virgil and Liv tell each other how much they care about each other, and Sierra comes back and talks about where her cousin is and how there is a lady in Florida that can help them. They inform Virgil of the cousin. I don't know why. So the lady that she is with is Fabi. I don't know why Fabi hasn't just killed the cousin, considering she's supposed to be stopping these kids from maturing to stop the demon, because she didn't want to end the world. At least I didn't think the sister did. I thought that was Jean Eli's thing. Although I guess the sister was also upset that her nephew and sister-in-law were dead. So it just wasn't very well developed. They decide, the three of them decide that they are going to road trip to Florida, and Lamar is going to take them because he now has his junior driving license and wants to repent for the betrayal of Virgil. During the road trip, there are cops, and Lamar is like, oh my gosh, what did you do to get the cops on you? And Virgil comes clean about having made Omar disappear, though why that would be linked to Virgil, I'm not entirely sure, since unless they have evidence. I guess they could have like fingerprints or something. He's worried that he might become some kind of monster. They all go quiet, and Liv is thinking about how she needs to help Virgil get to Florida so that he can find what he needs, and once that's all sorted out, then they can be together. Like, priorities, okay? We switch POV to the detectives going to arrest Omar. It's ridiculous how incompetent this makes everyone. The cops took 7 hours to get a warrant, quote, from the only judge in the city willing to pick up their phone. And then they brought the entire SWAT team to go down on this one guy. So is he some big deal or no? The detectives then go in and see the place is empty, but for some dust. Amazing to get stuff like this, quote, Detective 1 looked around and noticed a small pool of damp blood next to the particularly big pile of dust, followed by bloody sneaker prints heading out of the cellar door. Detective 2, Russ, looked at 1 and said, well, Marty, I guess we should call it. Detective 1, Marty, nodded in agreement as he calmly took the walkie-talkie from his utility belt. He then put blocky contraption to his mouth while simultaneously pushing the talk button on the side of it. They've been in multiple scenes now. I mean, I guess they were only in the transcriptions, but they're only getting names now. And they're literally just called Detective 1 and Detective 2 in these paragraphs with a parentheses of their names. You know, back in the transcript, you could have had that happen and they go, hey, hello, what's your face? My name is Detective Russ Brambert, and this is my partner, Marty McFly, Detective Marty McFly. So, like, you could have done this forever ago. Returning to Virgil and team road trip, Virgil finally offers a musical tape that he's had this whole time with his dad's favorite song on it and says that he will miss his dad. He and Liv hug each other and promise to care about each other forever. Randomly, we're now in North Carolina with some unnamed girl who is traveling, killing people, and controlling them as her slaves in a way that the demon talked about before. Doing before. And this girl is trying to catch up to Virgil. She finds Virgil and his team at a diner, ditches the guy that she was riding with so the cops can find him. And then the girl approaches Virgil and introduces herself as V inside of this diner. They invite her to just sit down and start talking to her. No suspicion whatsoever. And the scene just abruptly ends. Like, she literally just sits down and it ends, and then everybody is at a hotel nearby. And Sierra and Lamar go back to the diner for some food again after watching some movies. Liv and Virgil start making out until she stops them because she is shaking. He accepts her for what she is because she tells him about her mental disorders. And then she gets aroused by this and jumps on him. After they've had some time to do something to make them smile together, if you know what I mean, the friends come back from the diner. They're all sleeping, and then there is a knock on the door, and it's V from the diner, and she abducts Virgil with the powder, because the powder is like mind control powder. She flicks it in the face, and then they can't do anything. Following that, Lamar is arrested. So they've got two separate rooms, Lamar and Virgil in one, and then the girls in another. And so after V runs off with Virgil, the cops just show up and arrest Lamar. Probably, I'm assuming, for stealing the car, but I'm not entirely sure what he gets arrested for. Enter into a chapter of exposition on V about how she was raised by her father, who is related to Jean-Eli's sister, brought into this basically as a cult to get her 6 children who are born cursed. Jean-Eli went and picked 6 random women in the Dominican Republic resort to curse the offspring that would then be part of the demon summoning. That demon wants to become more powerful than Satan and open the gates to Earth and rule Earth, and he will do that with those 6 cursed children and their powers. I was mildly confused as to why V needed to come up to North Carolina to get Virgil just to bring him back to Florida when he was literally on his way to Florida, and she kidnaps him to take him back to Florida. Also, V somehow didn't know where Sierra's cousin was, who was also in Florida with Fabi, which is where she is going. Next, we get a chapter in a journal entries by Sierra where they're in the motel visiting Lamar in jail, and he is happy and stupid. He's like, this is pretty great. I don't know. And then they get picked up by Sierra's cousin, the one with the powers, once she heard about V. She and her adopted mom come to meet them and to bring them to Florida. Returning to Fabi Eli and Gonzalo Melfi, in 1982, they've chased Jean-Eli to the Dominican Republic. He's already dead. They stay there illegally, have a daughter. They stay there illegally, have a daughter. The dude gets obsessed with ending the curse that Jean-Eli started and gets fanatical while Fabi continues doing witchcraft. Eventually, it comes out that she is doing witchcraft and helping one of the cursed children, which is obviously why the older cousin is not dead. So then he tries to kill that cursed child, and he ends up dead. The cousin uses her powers to stop him from harming her. When Fabi came back to the fanatical daughter, V, or her name is actually Violet, she was told that her dad was dead. The dad had also trained this girl on the religious mission, and she was now mad that her dad was dead. So she has taken on the mantle of her father's religious mission to stop the evil children, while the mother is an evil witch who is only helping the children, I'm assuming, to stop them from becoming evil, but doesn't think that they are born evil. Anyway, returning to, I'm not sure when. The next chapter has 5 dates in it: 1998, 1999, 2006, 2016, and 2025 at the top. There are also names with those dates, though we only know 2 out of the 5 names so far, and it hasn't done anything with the other kids. Virgil is taken into V's house, where she tries to use his body as a conduit for her father. But he ends, I don't know why she thinks that his body can be used as a conduit, but he ends up in some realm with the other cursed kids, and then they're all talking to each other about working together at beating this thing. The realm is outside of time, as they're talking about where they all come from, that they don't know, and the realm is outside of time. They all say like what time period is when they were transported to this place. Apparently they are all being brought here at the same time somehow. Not really sure, because the cousin is supposed to be with Sierra. So like, is she in a, like, just zoning out in the car, or like, how is that working? They're talking about whether or not they think that they can stop this evil, though they don't think they can, but they aren't, but they do believe but they believe that they are not doomed to be evil. Then Virgil wakes up and he goes running and is begging for help. He runs into a convenience store and begs for help. Violet passed out at some point and is just on the couch when Fabi comes back in and asks her what she has done. The girl who let Violet get away says that she did what her aunt wasn't willing to do. I don't know what she means, because Violet's sitting here saying, I've done what you were not willing to do. But she didn't do anything to Virgil. Like, she kidnapped Virgil, but nothing happened to Virgil. Now over to Liv's journal entries. Then you have them catch up with Virgil, find him immediately, though not to be accosted. Find him immediately, though they are not accosted by V, despite another girl with powers being with them. And then they get told that Virgil is in the hospital in a coma, and Liv is sad. She kisses Virgil on the forehead, saying that she loves him, even if it's ridiculous how hard she has fallen for him already. And now, all of a sudden, V has Liv's number and is telling her that she is coming to finish the job. I have no idea how V just started calling this cell to be like, I'm coming for your boyfriend. I'm coming right now. Also, why did Fabi help in the first place when V and Fabi lived together? Like, you can make it work. There's just no explanation driven in this book. It is so bare bones. The mention from Liv's perspective also wasn't necessary, as V could have literally just shown up at the hospital and attacked instead of telegraphing her literal move. I don't know why she did that. Again, think about, like, from the perspective of the character, why would you do this? What do you want? How are you going to get that thing? And how does calling this random woman aid you in getting that goal? Like, you need to watch out as an author. You need to watch out for adding these details that add nothing to the story, but plot holes or questions for the reader. So V attacks Liv at the hospital. Virgil isn't in the bedroom, isn't in the hospital. Virgil isn't in the hospital room. And then we get this bizarre unmarked flashback to how that happened when Virgil woke up randomly from his coma and needed to use the bathroom. I really don't understand why so much of the story seems to be out of order. A showdown between V and Liv and Virgil happens. The nurse calls for the cops, who show up and shoot Liv before asking any questions because Liv, a teenager, was wielding a bedpan. They literally just kick the door in and then shoot her without saying anything. The cops she wasn't even attacking them. They didn't give her a warning. There was nothing. There was no reason for that. And everyone in the book is just rude and incompetent. The nurse goes, quote, "It wasn't her, you idiots," the nurse yelled to the officers. "It was that little brat next to her. You guys just shot an innocent girl." With Liv dead, Virgil is mad and decides that he knows he's a demon spawn and doesn't have to be a good person anymore, so he's just going to fulfill whatever they told him to do is his future. He also kills the police officers in the room. Magical girl Maritza, who is the cousin, is trying to calm Virgil down since they're both cursed kids. Meanwhile, the hospital is a horror show already. Quote, "The entire Orlando police force, Florida State police officers that were near the area, and even some National Guard soldiers were deployed to the horrific scene at the hospital, and they arrived carrying a heavy arsenal of guns and armor. They were also given some intel from the security guard who escaped. The guard stated that the person who was causing the unbelievable amount of destruction was some kind of supernatural oddity, an extremely lethal threat. This obviously made the people outside skeptical, but cautious nonetheless." Virgil goes outside, giving himself up with his hands up in the air and asking the soldiers to go inside and save his girlfriend, and that he surrenders. They keep shouting at him to get on the ground, and he says, "Look, I surrender. Just go and help my girlfriend." And then they're like, "He's not responding. Shoot him!" Excuse me? I'm sorry. It's literally not how any of this works, and you don't get shot. Like, it takes out the tragedy. You're gonna tell this is a Greek tragedy, but then put, like, none of the weight of what any of actually is happening is, and then put in none of the weight of what is actually happening, because, like, the realism of this stuff is what makes it tragic, not like just throwing out murder unrealistically. You generally do not get shot if you give yourself up. There are tragedies where it can happen, but in general, it doesn't. And so then, like, this just happening again and again, I'm just like, it doesn't matter. When he gets shot at, it doesn't kill him. The demon mode is back, killing everyone. And the magical girl, Maritza, comes out and asks him what he's doing. He's supposed to be getting help, and he's like, "The world is doomed and cruel, and I'm going to destroy it because I tried to be good and everyone abused me. Ah." I guess he's channeling Jean Eli. There is no emotional depth in this moment, though, because you didn't get to see his struggle, and he's pretending that he ever tried to be a good person, and because the world has been cruel to him, then he doesn't have to be a cruel person anymore. Aside from all of his friends being dicks, which pretty much happens anyway for most people in high school, I mean, not most people, which pretty much happens for a lot of people in high school, and then they became gang members, he became friends with the most popular girl in the school without even trying, got Liv, is successful at classes, his grocery store doesn't seem that bad, but then again, we didn't get much information about his family's grocery store. His parents seem loving. So what does work here, though, is the melodrama of teenage emotions and teenage angst. Because, like, his losing of his first girlfriend is the most traumatic thing that there possibly is, and he is so angry, and it is using the teenager's high emotional response for his irrationality. That's fine. But there is no build-up in this story to make it even matter. Virgil fights Maritza in the hospital, eventually sees that Liv is actually alive and moving because Maritza was able to do some sort of healing spell that has brought her back for 10 minutes, just long enough for Virgil to say that he loves her and then for her to die in his arms. Virgil then kills V, saying that he has learned in that dream state with the other cursed children that your deaths follow you, your kills follow you all of your life. And so he kills her, knowing that he will be keeping her. Returned to 1982, Jean-Eli again, and again we are out of order because previously we were with his sister who had been behind him, and they lived their life, she lived her life with her husband where they had a kid, and the women had already been cursed. Well, now we're going to Jean-Eli still being alive, walking around the beach, or the resort, finding women who will let him curse them, though he says it's a blessing for their child, and then the police running up afterwards and being like, hey, did you see this creepy guy that's running around offering to bless women? Like, it wasn't necessary because we already knew that he was doing that. So it was a repeat of something we've heard like 2 or 3 times, and it was out of order. Return to the present, Maritza is monologuing about how disappointed and scary Virgil was, and how she and Sierra decided that they needed to kill Virgil. Why didn't we actually see this in the scene as it was written? Instead, it happens off page, and then Maritza is talking about it after the fact. Sierra now has nightmares, she says, from how Virgil had been, including his hunting them down and monologuing. Quote, "Ha, you began. I heard you both gasp. You're in here, Sierra. I can smell your fucking perfume, party girl. And hey, aren't you like my sister, Maritza? Why are y'all hiding? Why do you cower like fucking dogs instead of stopping your little bro? Ain't you both trying to stop me to save humanity? Why do you even want to help these people, Maritza?" I have no idea why I remember all of this, but I do, and I remember this part too. You live your entire life trying to be a good person, and life ends up screwing you over in the end anyway. The only girl who believed in me, the only girl I will ever love, was killed trying to protect me. The police shot at me. It felt like nothing. I guess we can't die. We were meant for greatness, Maritza, and I was meant for greatness. I can be a new god! I mean, he's embracing it, I guess. But, like, why isn't this scene actually written instead of being written as a recollection when we were previously in the scene anyway with him following them? There would have been more tension in that scene as opposed to it being written after the fact with a monologue telling us what happened. Maritza says how sad Liv's mom is, how Liv was a good girl, because Liv is dead now, and how Virgil is in a mental ward for the rest of his life. Maritza is giving up all of her powers and curses to live a good Christian life and as an illegal immigrant, though she was now adopted by her aunt and uncle in Pennsylvania. I don't know why they didn't adopt her in the first place, but now she lives in Allentown with Sierra. Sierra is then reading her journals from 1999 in the year 2025 to again just monologue about the aftermath of 1999. Again, I don't know why it had to jump 16 years in the future for her to look back and then just relay the same scene of what it would have been back then. She says that gang members who burned down the grocery store were arrested. Nick and Rob, Virgil's old friends, Virgil's old loser friends, tried to become rappers and they sucked. No one knows what happened to Omar. Sierra and Lamar dated briefly until the end of high school, and then now he is a banker, a successful banker. Meanwhile, she has become a witch herself, despite Maritza stopping. You would think that she would honor at least Maritza, who has stepped away from that sort of thing, but apparently that did nothing to stop Sierra from chasing the dark magic. Virgil's journal entries have him monologuing about being in a special psych ward where the government's been doing testing on him to try and figure out what he is. Oh yeah, Sierra said that Virgil has this big fan club now that all treat him like some kind of god and worship him. Again, why are we not just seeing him? It would be much more creepy to actually see him interacting in the psych ward, to see how people treat him in the psych ward, to live in the psych ward with him, instead of being told what it looks like. It was at this point I was like, is this really just references to legit Greek tragedy plays where it monologues at you the entire time? Because this is not a book. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's not using any literary conventions to tell a story in prose. There is no prose here. Anyway, he is drawing Liv's picture obsessively in his rec room, despite how he's supposedly always in a straitjacket. He's got a janitor who made him a mixtape/CD with his favorite songs on it, and he's converting staff into the cult of Virgil, planning an escape someday and to use his demon powers to take over the world and bring Liv back to life. I'm still thinking about how Jean-Eli just didn't kill his sister to stop her from stopping him if he wanted the children to come out, but was it that he was like more compelled by the demon to do what he had to do, and so then he wanted her to stop him and she was just too slow to stop him? Again, something that wasn't really expanded on and explained very well. Final chapter is just Liv in heaven. Yes, you've got Liv in heaven talking to the creator, monologuing about how she is grateful, but she would also like to be allowed to go back to Earth to stop Virgil from destroying everything. And she understands that being granted freedom will come with its own cost of not being able to return once the job is done. The end. That is it. That is everything. That was The Cursed Six. So final notes. I don't really understand why the profanity was censored in this book. The target audience on Amazon says 16 to 18. The book feels much younger in being middle grade, but then if you're going to do it that way, if you're going to target it to middle grade, then don't put swearing in the book instead of just putting asterisks. Like, just do freaking. Like, just actually write it for the younger audience. There is, like I said at the beginning of this video, there is art at the top of each chapter. The art was kind of confusing because I think it leans more, the art style leans more into this middle grade feeling. The characters look very young, but the ages of the characters are off for it to be middle grade, because if they're 15, 16-ish, then that's going to be middle grade, but usually 15, 16-year-olds are reading older than their own age. Not always, but that's generally how it's seen in the genre, in the age brackets. This book read more like an outline of a story, like a first draft, as opposed to something that was fully developed. It also reads like it tries to hurry to get to hurting the reader, not actually enjoying creating the scenes or the characters or the moments or the imagery or the setting. The only things that it really described were the violence, and not even all of the violence. Obviously, I mentioned parts where it skipped the violence to then tell you about it afterwards, but it showed Virgil popping heads multiple times. It said that this was set in Pennsylvania, but nothing about it felt like Pennsylvania. It didn't describe the buildings, it didn't describe the people, it didn't really create the setting. So I didn't really understand why that was the setting. While you can tell a story in journal entries, obviously one of my favorite books this year was We Need to Talk About Kevin, which was told in letter format. There was no emotion in the summarizing of everything in this. What brings a reader with you somewhere is taking you there with the character's emotions and being in the moment of that story and feeling the emotional depth of that story, not just summarizing moments and then being like, it was terrible, he was guilty, he felt great, the day was awesome. So that's what makes it feel more like a summary. Sometimes when I was even writing the stuff in here, I'm like, it's about what it's written in is about the same way as the book is just telling you. We don't learn that Virgil has a cousin who works with him at his dad's store until 75% of the way there, and it's just mentioned in passing to kind of show more of like what is the design of this thing. Because so much of it is just monologuing, there really is no description of anywhere that they go, so you really don't have a sense of place. There are lots of conversations in this book just in Spanish. I mean, there's a fair number. No translations anywhere, which means that they don't mean anything to an audience that doesn't speak Spanish. It's constantly changing tenses in inappropriate places between past and present tense, which either marks that the author didn't go through and review for tense changes for editing, or the author doesn't know about those changes, but it just looks unedited. This entire book just ends up being telling. It doesn't really care to spend time writing out any of the scene interactions. It doesn't seem to care about writing out the characters or the relationships, building up any of it. And that is where the value and the emotion comes when it comes to feeling tragedy, to seeing tragedy, is that you actually feel it with the characters and you go through it with the characters and you worry about their loss. But like, Virgil was never a nice person. He was never a good person. He was just not as bad as his friends who were trash talking him. He was just a victim of his friends, but he was bitter the entire time. And most of the time when he talked, we just saw him being bitter and angry. So then later when he's talking about, oh, well, why should I bother being a good person? It never got me anywhere. When were you a good person? To make an exclamation like that, we have to see it somewhere, and we didn't. The story didn't even want to bother with just showing Virgil as a nice person. Something else is that all of the characters talked exactly the same, especially, like, they didn't talk very often, but when they did, it was exactly the same. They all swore the exact same way, and when you go between the journal entries of even Liv versus versus Sierra versus, if you go between the journal entries of Liv versus Sierra versus Virgil, they all talk exactly the same. There is no characterization in this book. Finally, there is very little action that actually moves forward on the screen. Mostly it's monologuing, and you don't really have the characters doing anything to push it forward. You would think that, you know, Virgil gets his power, and then that could cause something inside of him to either want to figure it out or to, obviously, it interacts with Liv, it interacts with Sierra, but he didn't even go to Sierra to be like, hey, why are you avoiding? And then, like, you could have had some interesting tension between him and Sierra where that demon was coming out because she was avoiding him and it was giving an emotional reaction. And so then he, like, cornered her and his eyes were glowing and he's like, hey, what are you doing? So there is so much in here that could be built up into a very tense, very tragic thing, but it just doesn't spend the time to get into that with these characters. And I'm not sure why it was so rushed and written the way that it was, even to the point where it's got like the transcript where it's not actually the scene with the detectives. It's like name, colon, stuff. It's written like a script, you know? And so I don't really know why it's like, I don't really know why it's written like this. But that was depressing. For a multitude of reasons. With that said, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? Looking forward to the discussion. With all that said, have a great weekend and don't die. And please don't be mad at me.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry. Flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?